Dylan Johns?
Yes.
Leanna Fisher? Thank you. And then House members, we have.
Just acknowledge that we have Julie Kolar and Paul Hiltz from Post.
Thank you. Okay, and our main item tonight is a resolution of work session, and can you kick that off, Susan?
Sure. I just want to clarify, we're doing something a little different. We're having a work session and a special meeting together. And normally on work sessions, we don't allow for public comment, but we are going to do that tonight. So we've got the meeting separated in 3 blocks: 30-minute presentation, 30 minutes of public comment. So if everybody on the public comment piece can be fairly succinct, so we can get through in a half an hour, and then a half an hour for council discussion. And after the council discussion, the goal is to pass another resolution, resolution number 34, which is an additional step in the our town planning process. And I think everybody that's sitting here, both in the audience and in the room, is aware that in January we passed resolution number 3, series of 2015, and that resolution kind of identified the next steps in our town planning process after the non-linear report to the town council in December. And then in April, the town council adopted another resolution. We call that actually the map resolution. And in that resolution, the town council said that this map here is showing the potential buildings and park lines. It also said that we would have additional public comment and further directed the P&Z and Post to further the process. And if you remember kind of in resolution 3, which was the first resolution, the goal was to give some of the work back to our boards and committees. Really, a lot of work has been done by the P&Z, and that's really the primary purpose of today's meeting, is to have the P&Z report on the work that they accomplished based on the map resolution, but also to kind of give an opportunity for the Post Committee to explain kind of the status of where they are. So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss the P&Z recommendations on the CDC parcel, the Marino Park parcel, and the Lions Park parcel. And we're also going to discuss kind of the Polygon parcel, which is really kind of created by, here's the big V and here's the proposed buildings line. And it's kind of this area that's not in the big V and it's not in the proposed building line. Then we want to talk about the Planning Commission's option that they developed, but we want to do a check-in with the town council in our discussion if there's any other options the town council wants the P&Z to look at. And then we want to have in the work session part, we want the town council to provide direction to the town manager and the town's financial advisor on next steps, kind of how do you direct the P&Z and direct Post. So again, kind of how we have this outlined. I'm going to turn it over to Dylan Johns. Dylan is the chair of the P&Z. He's going to kind of just give a brief, at the beginning, just kind of a brief summary of the P&Z's process. Then Tim Malloy is going to talk about the master plan update, which is kind of a key piece to what the P&Z's been working on. Dylan's going to then talk in more detail about the P&Z's kind of iterative process and the recommendation that they developed. And CCY then is going to add any additional comments. Then DHM is going to talk about the Lions Park option, which was another option that was brought up at the very last meeting that the P&Z had. Julie Kolar is going to talk about the Post work. DHM is going to quickly add some more information on the park planning, and then we'll sum up that presentation with Mike Scanlon talking about the financial analysis and kind of how we have that program. So that's what we have outlined. And then we're going to have 30 minutes of public comment and then the council discussion. We're going to run a little bit over the 6 o'clock time frame. We know that. So everything in the regular agenda is just going to be pushed back a little bit. So with that works for everybody. I'm going to turn it over to Dylan.
And before Dylan starts,
Well, thank you, everyone. Good evening. Since we are limited on time, I am going to try to keep this to a more bullet point presentation of some of the key items that were part of this whole study. And I think that our hope would be that, obviously, if there's questions tonight, we're happy to answer them, that we can continue to discuss them on some level. I know that there's a desire to turn a motion to a next step. But a lot of people, not just planning and zoning, have put a lot of work and time into this. And as I think we've all found out, it's a very big issue in the community. We effectively started this planning effort with entrance to Basalt studies before town planning ever started, and we got into talking about different areas of town that might be suitable for some kind of a redevelopment scheme. And whether that generated the R-Town process or not, it seemed to be a nice lead-in to the overall process. And we were already a little bit thinking about some of these areas and what might be best for town. Susan says, and you all know, we've had many meetings. There've been hundreds of sketches. DAC committee met for several months about this, and we've been working on this for the past few months to try to get it to the master planning. We wanted to take a more comprehensive approach to at least the 3 areas that were identified in the future land use map, because we didn't want to look at each parcel individually and have something that felt disjointed. We did break that up as we were looking at individual parcels. We did spend more time talking about the Pan Fork parcel in particular than some of the other ones. I think that we probably want to have more conversations about the other ones in detail. But I think that we were able to at least identify some general parameters for what might happen here. And in most cases, we deliberately made the choice to talk about the number of stories of a building, but not specific heights, to try to look at certain building footprints within these lots rather than talk about a specific square footage, because many years of doing this has told me that whatever you come up with at the beginning is probably not going to be exactly what the best alternative might be at the end of the day. But we did want to definitely make sure that we weren't shooting in the dark and had something to kind of look at when we were doing this. And hence the studies from CCY, which were not designed to be a development exploration of what they had already proposed, but more use their knowledge of the site already, and having looked at this in a number of different ways already, to kind of take the abbreviated road to informing us as to how one scenario might play out on the site. And really, I think for us it was, is this a workable option as well? Could this potentially turn into something? Because that is an important component of any development plans, regardless of where they are, if you want the private sector to be a part of that. And I think that, at least from my perspective, and I think many of my commissioners as well, our thoughts were more about what is going to be best for the future generations of Basalt residents, rather than necessarily ourselves, some of the people who have been here for a long time. It's not that we certainly don't appreciate, and I think I've learned a great deal myself over the process, as we've had so many meetings and so much input in trying to develop what might be best for everyone, but barring that, at least to try to think in some spots, which we'll talk about a little bit later, how we might be able to best utilize some of these parcels, because we understand that the life cycle on these is long enough that we're not going to be around to likely see the end of it. So for that, I'll turn it over to Susan.
Sure. Tim is going to give a brief update on the master plan amendment. Again, this was something that we included in that resolution 3, which we adopted in January. What we recognized that we needed to amend our current master plan to reflect the work that Doc was doing as the P&Z and Town Council evolved it.
So I'm over here.
Hi, Tim. Well,
Yeah, so I'm going to do a brief presentation, very brief, that talks about this master plan amendment, which is distinct from the work that's being done and that has been commissioned by the town and that CCY is working on, which is really a more detailed look at a few of the parcels that are within the Our Town planning area boundary. What we're going to be talking about here for the next couple of minutes is what's called the Our Town Sub-Area Plan, an amendment to the current 2007 Town of Basalt Master Plan. And that plan includes several components. It includes a text component that has sort of background information about the Our Town planning process, about what came out of that, about the survey work that was done as part of that. It includes a discussion of the authority under the state statutes for adopting comprehensive plans and master plans, and also a description of the fact that the town of Basalt is unique in as much as you guys also have a council. In your charter, you require the council to adopt a master plan. It includes an amended future land use map, which simply says, that's figure 2 in the document, that simply says, for all information related to future land use, look to the DAC report and the DAC plan and subsequent work that's been done. Then it includes the DAC report in total with a few tweaks. Those are tweaks to the actual plan that was in the DAC report, as well as some of the images that both the Planning Commission and Council felt could be adjusted and changed in order to better express sort of the physical appearance of how things were intended to look like. And then it includes an amended topology map and some topology exhibits. I'm just going to kind of quickly fly. This is the text that I was referring to, and this is an implementation steps appendix. This has been done as an appendix because we think that there's probably some likelihood that that's going to change. This is the Our Town Study Area Future Land Use Plan, and you can see here that it just refers to the DAC map, and this is the revised DAC map that shows the change to the intersection of Midland and the T intersection right there at the park, and it shows the other changes that were discussed, including the removal of some references to heights.
So an important note if you go back to the map. Some of the key changes, one where it was expanding the area where that big V is to go to the proposed buildings line. 2, it takes out the number of stories that was on the previous dock plan. There was some reference, some bubbles had like underground parking, and we just took that off the map. And then there's an important map clarification at the bottom of the map in the legend, just kind of indicating that you're not supposed to be measuring from the map, because there was quite a bit of measuring that was done from the original map, and just clarifying that for the purposes of what we're doing, you're not supposed to be measuring from the map.
Any questions about this? Okay. So this is the revised typology map, and the only real change here, and even if I had a pointer it wouldn't work on the screen, is that we've, in the area of the Our Town planning area boundary, we've, see, it doesn't work. I don't think it works if you have a screen. Oh, it does work, okay. We've basically, within this area, that's the Our Town planning area, we've introduced an additional neighborhood type, which is called Our Town Vitality Area. And that is what is being referred to, and we've added some then description sheets also, which follow. And these are the description sheets, these 2 sheets. And you can see it says the Our Town Vitality Area, it's labeled 2D. That's the 2D that you see on the map previously in that area. So these 2 typology description sheets only apply to those areas that are labeled 2D on the map, and they are confined to the area within the Our Town planning study area boundary. And the first one here deals primarily with sort of the open space and trail connections and the kind of character that the town hopes to achieve with those sort of connections and open space pieces, which was a very important component of the DAC report in terms of its recommendations regarding what should occur within the study area. And the second one is really more about sort of the physical structures, components, looking at 4 stories, how that should be set back, how the open spaces, some character about the open spaces. Again, these 2 sheets are intended to give somebody who's interested in doing some development within this area some sort of sense of what the town is trying to achieve in terms of the character within the area. And then this is the DAC report in total and its recommendations and the photographs that were included in that report as modified by the Planning Commission and Council. So just a couple more points about this before we move on. This master plan amendment is important because it takes the work that was done by the DAC committee and the input that was taken through the Our Town planning process, and it makes it into a formal amendment to your master plan. And the purpose of that is really to provide you with a little bit more weight in terms of reviewing future development proposals and planning concepts within this area that stems from the requirement under state statutes that when you're doing a rezoning or some other level of approval that's sort of quasi-judicial, that you have the ability to require compliance with this document. It's intended to be used in conjunction with the existing 2007 master plan, the policies and recommendations that are included within that, as well as the work that has been done in the open space and trails master plan. And the intent, the stated intent on page 2 or 3 of this document is, to the extent possible, balance, the policies and recommendations of all 3 of these plans in your efforts to try and come to the right approach for development within the Our Town study area. This amendment is more general in nature than the work that you're going to see that's being done by CCY. That is more a sort of specific square footages and footprints and heights and so forth. This is more of a general policy document and can be viewed as a separate piece from the work that's being done by CCY. This isn't the last opportunity that the public will get to comment on this plan. It's going to go through the formal adoption process, which requires a formal hearing both at the Planning Commission level and at the Town Council level. So we'll have that opportunity for the public to comment. And also just to note that this is sort of an interim master plan amendment in as much as the town has already begun the process of doing a fairly comprehensive update of your current 2007 master plan. And some of these issues will be addressed in that process as well, and it will ultimately be adopted. And most likely this piece will either get absorbed or somehow otherwise accommodated, and this will go away as a planning document for the town. So that is my presentation. If there are any comments, I'd be happy to take those now.
Okay.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
So Dylan, you have the baton again,
Okay.
just really to talk in more detail about the BZ's kind of conclusions and recommendations on the 3 parcels and the polygon.
Okay. As you know, the April 22nd sketches up there represent kind of, in general, the first round of design studies looking at the footprint of at least Pan Fork and Lions Park. Well, I guess all 3. And so there were some other A's and B's and C's that were presented along with that. We picked out a few options that were our favorite at that point, and in another meeting kind of took a closer look at what we liked most about those. The key things I think that were coming up again and again were how the building presented itself both to the park and to the street. Obviously we were able to kind of boil it down to the one which we sort of moved forward at 3E2, I think. But there were some merits to each one that we kind of liked, but ultimately felt that was the best representation there. We did look at potentially abandoning 2 Rivers Road on one of those studies. It had some intriguing things, but I think at the end of the day, we decided to abandon that because it didn't seem to have, it seemed to be causing a lot more problems with the execution that it's solved. But you know, there are some points in there which could still merit some consideration. As I said before, 75,000 feet was used as a potentially workable and viable area for some kind of development there. That number was simply half of what had been previously presented, and questions that we were asking and some of the information that CCY presented was relative to whether or not this would be at all feasible for any kind of development on there. There are, as I said before, there was a lot of discussion about stories and that sort of the dimensional requirements, keeping those loose. I think that we wound up, most of the P&Z, not all, favored the 2 to 2.5 story for the Pan and Fork as you're coming into town, with an emphasis being on additional density and stories within the Clark's Market parcel, just because of the way that site was laid out, and effectively allowing for more stories to sort of hide within that. But specifically, we were asking for looking at images of towns, mountain towns, various towns, looking for something that felt good, and then of course looking at our own Main Street. A lot of towns have 2-story buildings or 3-story buildings that are taller than 28 feet, typified by a tall first-story element, which I think the Brick Pony building is a good representative of. And so we were trying to focus on potentially creating that kind of character on the ground floor, to maximize the possible use down there and have it read like an older town would, and then up above that, a little more flexibility. We did want to make sure that what we were putting forth in this allowed for a range of options, and when you think about square footages and you define that number to be something, if you don't have a certain latitude in there, then if you're doing a 50,000, 75,000, 100,000 square foot building, whatever that winds up being, if there's an opportunity for an extra 5,000 square feet to turn the project from a good building to an exceptional building, we would rather allow that opportunity to be built into the process rather than force people under a ceiling. As far as the uses go, I think that given that the bond issue was, and the purchase of this land was predicated on a hotel plan, I think that was what we had. We didn't necessarily, as you can see by the uses list matrix up there, we didn't design it around the hotel, but what we did talk about very specifically was trying to make sure that in each of these 3 areas that there was some kind of an anchor or a node which was going to actively bring people to that space within the city. Residential is kind of sort of effective. I mean, it's putting ideally bodies in a location, but where a town hall is, where, you know, whether it's a grocery store or some other type of store or performing arts center or a hotel, something which is going to have a more community-wide appeal to it, which is going to bring people there, was something that we definitely were thinking about and talking about. We made this matrix by kind of going through a very quick yes or no process, because you start to think about any of these things for too long, and you start to think of all sorts of reasons why you might not want it or why you might want it. So I would say that ultimately, before this gets codified, we probably want to take a look at that again. But I think some of the big takeaways from that were that putting a performing arts center or a movie theater or a rec center on something like the Pan and Fork was seen as really not being appropriate for that space, because the nature of those buildings is very inwardly focused, and that is not something that we felt would be utilizing this space very well at all. As has been pointed out by lots of people in the community, this is prime real estate, and it is an opportunity for us to put forth what we want to have there and maximize that experience for our guests. As far as the polygon space is concerned, off to the east, started off with a question of to build or not to build, and then it was followed by do we direct people into town by giving them directions off of the bathrooms?
Off of what?
Off of the bathrooms. If that, I mean, one of my first reactions was, oh, let's put some bathrooms in there for the park to use. It's functional, it's practical. And then one of the commissioners said, well, so basically I say turn left at the bathrooms and turn right at the bathrooms, and that sounded kind of generic and not exactly what we might want to put forth. Since we've effectively, since Resolution 19 has kind of neutralized the actual intersection of Two Rivers and Midland Avenue, to us that polygon turned into an opportunity to really present a definition to people who are coming into the town. And I would say that some of the leading program uses for that would be an info center, youth center, perhaps a beer hall with a music component to it, something that could year-round actively engage that part of the site and also help a year-round program for the rest of the park. I think that I think a lot of the commissioners felt that to put this park to sleep for 6 months out of the year and put this whole area to sleep for 6 months out of the year would be potentially wasting an opportunity. And so with that in mind, we talked about, at least for the park, where to put the bandstand. I think that's been a basic component from the beginning. The idea of having concerts here is a great one, and especially if the existing stage in Lions Park moves or goes away. Where do we put that? DHM can get into that, but we were talking about having the red rocks of the Roaring Fork Valley with the river in the background instead of the city of Denver, and how cool would that be? Multiple uses throughout the park to spread the activity around and not just make it a place where you had to bring a frisbee or a dog to enjoy yourself. And then also talked about the opportunity for public events to happen, large scale, small scale, public, private, but really bringing Basalt into a realm where we can have different uses be there and really max it out. How can we bring life to town? And to us, that was going to be a key component of that. So I think that's going to conclude my iterative process.
Next, I just had Laura just really quickly going over kind of the pros and cons of a last option that was presented to us. At the final P&Z meeting, we had a representative from Twin Rivers come and ask us about a couple additional. Twin Rivers is the condominiums that are right over here.
Oh,
yeah, right. And what they're concerned about is losing their view. In fact, Sandy had me go up to her upper story to look at her view, but then she was likewise concerned about the people on the lower level. So that was kind of at the final meeting. Actually, they came up with this option, which was kind of, Laura, did you want to?
Yeah, I'm going to have Jen.
Oh, okay, perfect.
So this is Jen from DHM.
All right. So we thought there was a
outlined our options. They were very, very creative, and also were addressing some of the real concerns that we were having. So option one, which is actually her second option, but the top option here, would actually create a cul-de-sac or a dead end instead of having New Owensboro come all the way through. It would move the development sites over back up against the hillside and would preserve that view corridor. And so we thought there were some good things about that in that it sort of moves the buildings out of the view corridor, maintains the big V, and it also maintains the space that we currently have between these buildings and then this open space here. So it's a nice relationship in a way in which activities can kind of flow out into this space. The disadvantages of this particular version is we felt like it well, now this is a great farmer's market space, and this would, in essence, cut off a lot of that use. It would also end up pushing a lot of traffic onto Two Rivers Road, which would be difficult. This is used quite a bit for traffic going towards Route I, and it also just helps to keep this intersection here from stacking up too much. Which we also felt like if we're trying to keep the parks connected, having a busy intersection here wouldn't be advantageous. It also would reduce some of the visibility and the energy surrounding Saxy's and some of the other businesses in this zone. And also somewhat interferes with the historic Y of the Basalt Railroad. One of the other advantages that we didn't really consider and that we heard about later was that with both of these options, pushing the buildings up against the hillside, you don't necessarily have to think about the number of stories because you're up against the hillside. And so there's also an opportunity potentially for having parking and taking care of some of that need in the town. So option two would actually realign Woodland Spur, sort of almost a little bit, closer to the intersection now. And we felt like there are definitely some good things with this, and that it still continues Midland Spur. We could still use it as the farmers market. It could still sort of work as a Wooner concept, and would also maintain that traffic split to keep circulation working somewhat the way it is right now. What we felt like was a con to this option was the fact that we now have this empty space without that active edge that all of a sudden, the Wiley and the other uses here would be cut off from having that open space associated with it. And just having that, that lack of activity would sort of pull people through all the way to the park the way they are now. And also, it also somewhat interferes with the historic Y of the Basalt Railroad. So
that's good. I think that's good for that. And the next, and actually, why don't you stay up here, Jen? You can have my seat, and we're going to go to.
Actually, I just wanted to make mention, since this did kind of come in at the 11th hour of our process, we kind of talked about it for a few minutes, but we were at a point where we really didn't have a chance to discuss it all the way through. So
that's really why you're seeing it in the packet, and the fact that she kind of went to the additional effort of giving you some more options to look at. And so one of the things that we have later on the agenda, is there any other options that you want the P&Z to consider? So we have that later as a discussion item. So we honestly don't want to bog down this presentation or discussion. I think right now we're kind of ready to kind of move on. We don't need to talk a lot about the park, but the park became pretty important to the discussion both at the P&Z and at Post. And Julie Kolar is here just to kind of explain the work that Post is doing on the park. And I know a lot of the public are interested in the park.
Hi, I'm Julie. Thanks for listening. So I'm representing Post, and we've really just begun taking a closer look at the park itself. So we don't really have any specific or detailed interpretations or recommendations or anything like that. Really, obviously we're really excited about the potential. There's so much to be done here, and we really want to maintain that focus and make sure that we're always having a duality between what's being developed or potentially so and what park space is, and really how they balance and work together. I think commending the design teams that have been working on this. There are so many options and possibilities and pros and cons and back and forth, and so we completely respect all of that, and we're constantly weighing them ourselves. But really, at the end of the day, we want something that's very thoughtful and very well designed, and that's clearly going to be our goal. In general, we see great value in balancing both the activated spaces and activities, as well as, you know, the aesthetics and the visual corridors. Again, we haven't talked specifics. We haven't said, okay, we have to keep X amount of space dedicated to X items and whatnot. We haven't gotten that far, but having a balance, I think, is definitely going to be on the top of our priority list. We've reviewed and provided input on the passive and the wetland side already. We talked a little bit about how those spaces might work. DHM provided some design options. We talked a little bit about the boardwalks and how those tie into the trails. So we've already kind of worked through a lot of those. Those are obviously going to be constructed a little bit ahead of time. And we've just, like I said, begun studying the active parks, both the design options and programming and organization. We have discussed kind of overarching ideas with DHM, who's in turn kind of taking some of those things in, so we'll be excited to see kind of how those things process out. I think in general, sort of our initial impressions of working with the presented concepts, and these again are the loose concepts that you guys have all seen, is that we really favor a holistic approach. You know, one that really considers the whole of downtown, really looks at, you know, all of the needs, all of the wants, all of the connections, and all of those things. Because if we start to look really insular to these different areas, we lose sight of really what's going to be effective overall. Because we can really easily solve things, perhaps in Lions Park or elsewhere, and don't have to try to cram it all in. So we want to make sure we keep that holistic approach. We do believe in Lions Park and the design and programming there. Not only helping to alleviate all of the pressure on the riverfront, but also because of its vital connection to Midland, and that, you know, that real, I guess, inviting way to get people downtown, not just going on the street or the sidewalk and whatnot. So it could be a nice way to funnel people. We discussed this cool approach of, it was called an energy map, and I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it really just is more conceptual, and it looks at where things are happening within spaces. And DHM initially presented sort of like a peripheral energetic and then an internal energetic. And I think we walked away with the idea that it probably would be best to focus a lot of the energy internally in Lions Park. That way it would draw people from Midland, it would draw people into the space and encourage use, but then maintain most of the energetic on the outside of the riverfront park so that you can, you know, invite people from the outside. It's, I think, more when it's more activated, people are more drawn to the space. But by maintaining that internal space is open, there's more flexibility for events, for a lot of things that we don't want to necessarily define every day. So kind of integrating more density in Lions Park and kind of drawing people through the middle of Lions Park, and then focusing on the periphery of the riverfront park. And that was,
And that's a little drawing.
oh yeah, there's a little drawing of
that represents, here's Lions Park, and then kind of funneling people to Lions Park and opening up and River Park.
Yeah, so as a generalized concept, that seemed to feel pretty good to us without getting too specific. In terms of, you know, talking about that central aspect of Lions Park, you know, we can envision paths, interactive gardens, places to linger, have lunch, you know, a lot of little kind of niche spaces. We talked a little bit about the High Line. We talked a little bit about, in New York City, as reference, we talked a little bit about the original railroad alignments, and are there any possibilities there that we can think about conceptually? Just kind of some neat ideas, nothing, again, specific. And then looking at the peripheral energy at the riverfront park, and really balancing, once again, with active and spaces, and then also flexible open spaces. Again, we want to keep it activated, but yet keep views open. So, you know, the best of all perfect worlds, right? I think that we felt like centralizing activities or periphery activities helps to keep amenities kind of clumped together. It helps to be seen from the outside. It might promote a sense of safety within the park, all of those things. And then again, the central spaces, you know, we talked to everything about big gatherings, events, concerts, things like that. You know, to start crowding the center seems sort of, I guess, in contrast with that type of ideal. We talked a little bit about location of like a bandstand or location of larger elements, and I think there's a lot of different ideas that I think can be pursued there. So I don't think we had anything, you know, anything specific. But in general, we're really excited about the opportunities, and I think just to reiterate that it's really going to be important in how that park relates with the development. And so we don't ever want to look at it as just a park and, you know, like everything. We really want to balance those uses and make sure that one informs the other. So there's no disconnect, no cutoffs, nothing blocking something else. So we're going to be really sensitive to that interactive balance.
Good, thanks, Julie.
So we have two pieces, and I'm pretty sensitive about the time. So I think all I want Jim and Jen to do is maybe just talk a little bit about this diagram that was kind of comparing some of the parallel discussions with the P&Z and Town Council on the park, and then just follow up and ask John if he has anything to add. John Howell, if he has anything to add to the discussion on the square footages and height of buildings. So Jen, and honestly, I think we should make it
really fast. Well, Julie just did a really great job of summarizing sort of the work that we've done, and Dylan also did a really good job of summarizing what we had done with P&Z as well. And so what we tried to do is collect feedback from both of those different entities and figure out now moving forward, you know, where were those commonalities and how can we use that as sort of a trigger for the next phase of design as we start thinking about the park and how the park will then be moving along at the same time, sort of looking at things holistically with the other development. So based on our conversations with P&Z, some of the takeaways were that they liked the variety of programming ideas that we had presented, and those sort of relate back to the different options that we come up for the polygon. We had a number of different ideas of ways in which we could sort of activate that space, things that could go in that space, and they liked sort of the variety that we'd come up with. They liked the fact that one of the ideas that had come up was, you know, what's the comfort level with having something within the Big V? Is it the sacred space, or is it something that they're, you know, is it something that we could have some activities happening with, some structures? We don't know. But they felt like they wanted to have some activities starting to spill out into that Big V, that it wasn't all concentrated into that polygon area. There was another idea that had come up about having a basalt beach. And so that was a concept that got a little bit of traction, and we got excited about that as well, as a way in which to have people sort of interact with the water, possibly with a little stream instead of the actual river itself. We liked the way in which the park could connect to the town and to the riverfront and to the confluence. And they wanted to see programming more evenly distributed throughout the site, again, not just within the Big V. And there was also some talk about wanting to have, you know, attractions throughout the seasons and then also day and night. So thinking about ways in which to incorporate lighting and make it appealing both at night as well. Our meeting with Post went really well, as well as Julie was saying. One of the things that came up is there a way that we can keep bringing up some of the historical precedents, the railroad history, the trailer park site, how can we sort of honor those ideas? They also felt like it would be great to keep the space within the Big V flexible, but also thinking about ways in which to limit the height within that space. And incorporating features within the park that were appealing to a multiple number of visitors. And then they also felt like the bridge and the location of the bandstand, that it would be appropriate actually to move the bandstand into this area here. So that was a commonality that they felt like that didn't have to happen within the polygon, but that could happen somewhere else. And that the idea of having some natural landforms and platforms was also appealing to both. And that buildings within the polygon may or may not be acceptable, but it was something to kind of explore in the future. So.
Thank you.
So just to wrap up, John, is there?
Yeah, I think there might be just, and I promise it's literally 120 seconds because there have been fantastic summaries here. And the other thing that would be great to get, I know some people it's hard to see what's happening in the park and DHF studies, but they're really exciting. So some things both for council and maybe members of the public, P&Z had asked us to prepare some boards for how the scale of buildings that are being proposed get expressed and broken down. And I'm not going to go through these in detail, but there are a series of boards which we could discuss here or in the future. So building scale compatible with historical downtown. It has a variety of Western roof forms and illustrations of that. And we went through these in P&Z. A street level interest, obviously really important, pardon you guys. And lastly, there was the idea of contemporary reinterpretation, using the libraries in one example, but obviously energy conservation is another, that we're not just a backward-looking town, we're a forward-looking town as well. And then I think most importantly, there are a lot of questions, of course, is what these buildings, if they happen, feel like and look like. And I think the most important of those, so it's a street level, eye level perspective of you drive into town along Two Rivers Road. You just passed RMI, the buildings on Triangle Park and Merino Park, which are here in this study are on your left, and then the new development on the CDC parcel is on the right. And as you can see, it's composed of, we spent quite a bit of time in P&Z talking about that it would be composed of 1, 2, and 3-story elements, and it's divided kind of vertically, so as you drive along the street, that would be the perception. And then the last was, if you were to come to the 4-way stop sign and look out at the park, what would you see? And this was the last block out of that. And what this little 1-story building is actually the piece that's in the, Susan, what do you call it? The polygon. Backed by, so that's 1-story, 2-story, and 3 stories behind it. So that's the quality of open space from the 4-way stop. So I think that's it. Everything else has been covered really well. A lot of information.
So sorry that took longer than originally we had kind of programmed, but we can go to the public comment period of this, and just to kind of enter into the record, we received a number of correspondence today, and Pam passed those out and handed them at your desk, and then there's some in the back of the back table too.
Okay, thanks, Susan. Okay, even though we got behind, I feel like we need to give this group the 30 minutes that we promised you, since the other groups got their 30 minutes. We are asking you to keep your comments concise, because there's a lot of people in the room who may want to say something, and that you focus on the master planning issues that came up just now. So having said that, I say, let's go. Just please stand up, state your name, make your comments for the record. And where can we start? Comments on the master plan. Ted.
I'll be the guinea pig. First, I'd like to strongly urge council to adopt resolution or ordinance 34. I think it's a very positive step forward, and we do need to keep moving. The second thing is I would ask you to consider zoning the development parcel the same C2 zone as downtown. It limits development to 2 stories, except for 1 or 2 exemptions, one of those being a hotel. It's part of our core of Basalt, so it's not spot zoning. It is the rest of the community. And I think to be able to move forward, to be able to get any developer to look at this thing and figure out if it's financially feasible, we need to have an underlying zoning. We really can't do anything, they can't do anything without a guideline as to density and heights and uses. And that's a good one. If you want to amend it as we move forward, that's fine. But I think do that as part of this ordinance 34 and allow this to be a far more productive analysis, economic testing than it has been to date. Because we've got too many pieces and not enough specifics. Thanks.
Thanks, Ted. Someone else? No comments on the master plan? Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Doug McLean. I wanted to just make a comment or two, if I can, about the proposal known as option 5A and 5B, which is one that recently been considered. This was proposed by my neighbor Sandy Kacharczyk, who couldn't be here tonight because she had to be out of town. But I live in the building too, the Two Rivers building. That's the one you may not have noticed. It's 5 stories. It can go unnoticed because it doesn't block anybody's view of anything. and that's one of its advantages. And it's also one of the advantages she points out about moving the large structure against back out of Lions Park and against the hillside. It would, as she points out in an email that she sent to some people yesterday, it would allow for a good deal of parking to solve a certain problem without involving any large parking structures or anything. The other thing it does is it opens up Lions Park. Now, one of the comments, I don't quite understand all of the cons. One of them is that the buildings are separated from Lions Park. Well, I live in the building, and the 30 or 40 of us who do live in that building probably spend as much time interacting with this area and looking at it, walking it, and living it as anybody in this hall. And it seems to me that opening up the park for the view for the river benefits not only those of us who live there, but everybody coming down to this end of Midland Avenue. It creates an open space. The other thing is that Lions Park, as it currently is a pretty vibrant place. There's a lot that goes on there. And I don't know why, and it works. It works where it is. There's events going on all the time, lots of shows, music, and other things. I know they could be moved somewhere else, but they work very well there. So there's something to be said about letting the organic nature of growth have an influence in the process rather than totally top-down management. So I'm not saying that this is the best proposal, the best proposal we could possibly have, but among the ones that were considered seriously at the meeting last month, it seems to me that this has a number of advantages.
Thank you. Other comments on the master plan draft? Yeah, Mark.
Okay. This is particularly about one specific part of the master plan, but I think it's important. I think one of the things that's been missing in this whole thing has just been from the original proposal that came in February with the 4-story hotel. All this footage was really what is the amount of development that is really needed to pay off if that's what the town wants to do. If the town does not want to buy the property and do some other things, what is the amount of development really that if the object was, because I think this is a very critical piece of the puzzle, how much development would be required to return the developer a nice profit and also the CDC get paid off? How much footage are we talking about? And the highest and best use, if the developer were to come in, would say, okay, very nice luxury townhomes, like something on the nature of what's up at Riverwalk. So that equates to 30,000 square feet of residential. And I've asked the developer, I said, why don't you come with a proposal that shows what the profits are rather than, playing, let's wait and see what Basalt comes up with. That's sort of like going, talking to a contractor and having the discussion and not having the price of the house, part of the discussion. We've been missing that part of the discussion. And I think all of our interpretations and ideas of what we're going to do have been aimed at trying to pay the CDC back their money and pay the town back their money. But I think that piece of the puzzle should be thought about because it's sort of it has been driving our discussion. The developer's saying, well, let's wait until see what Basalt comes up with and then maybe we'll take a look at their plan, from a financial side. And so I say that because it really is. It's 30,000 square feet as opposed to 150,000 that originally was proposed. And I think it could be all put down by RMI very easily. The developer could get a very nice profit, and everyone could be paid back. So it is an option. And I don't think if we're going to be moving forward, rushing into something here, and I don't think it's rushing it. We've had a lot of discussion, but the piece of the puzzle that's been missing is how much is the sink? How much is the roof? How much is the foundation here? And if we, you know, that piece of the puzzle is actually, it's about half of the remaining CDC parcel from Midland Spur towards RMI. A little bit more than that could suffice with a 3-story building for the residential. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, what's his name?
Well, I just have a couple comments. One is I don't know if it's possible, but I do agree with Ted about, you know, if you could create an underlying zone for a parcel, whatever parcel it is, instead of the only option being some kind of a PUD, that would, I think, be helpful in terms of getting something to happen. I don't know if it's possible in this case, but I do support that. The other thing was just a point about my experience about living here and understanding what has happened historically in town, and it has to do with these strange little alignments about how the railroad was or how the main road was up to the old Red Brick School, things like that. And I think that the little walk streets and all that, and I think that those little places, those kind of odd idiosyncratic layouts that have, you know, become layered over time, really give a small town like ours a lot of character. And I think it makes a lot of maybe planning sense to push this over here and push that over there. But I think that there's also that idea that when people come to a place over time, they really appreciate learning why things were there and what the uses may have been. And these old photographs about where the trestles were and where the junctions were, I think putting those pieces together for people does have some depth and some meaning. And so I would just kind of weigh in on that and, you know, have that be one side of the argument. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, Kathy, and then Jerry.
I'm Kathy Cliff, and I would just like to say that for once, I agree with Joe, that I don't necessarily agree that C2 zoning is the best, but I do believe that zoning the parcel for development is going to be our most proactive thing that we can do in order to put out to developers so that they can see what it is that we want, and instead of waiting for them to decide for us what we want, because I think we've had ample opportunity to express what the town is really interested in having down there. And I would also like to say that in view of the master plan, that I think that having the public amenities on that parcel in its entirety as the park and as the development come into fruition, that really focusing on the public amenities and how they would interact with private development like a hotel. If you have a bandstand with concerts, how does that affect people staying in a hotel or living in a unit there? And I hope that that somehow can get incorporated into the master plan typology discussion.
Thanks, Kathy. Okay, Jerry.
I agree most of what Kathy says. I just want to make a comment. It seems like all the time we worry about profit for the developer. I don't think that's the town's problem. I don't think as a taxpayer I'm worried about a profit for the developer. I don't think I like being channeled that we got to do something so that the developer will make a profit. That's not what the town's role is.
Thanks, Jerry. Others? All right, there's no more comments out there. I guess I'll go to council for comments.
Oh, I thought Mike was going to talk.
Was Mike going to talk?
No, it's to you and then I'll talk to me.
Okay.
I'll
Yes, sir.
start.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
When I see this stuff and when I saw what Jen presented to us, it gets me fired up. I hope you guys get excited about it too. I think we're moving in a really good direction. We're starting to focus in on a little bit further down the road of what we're going to end up with, and I get excited about it. I think we're making progress. We're doing it methodically and with input from the community and talks among ourselves, and we're not jumping to conclusion, but I'm really excited about the direction that we're heading in. So thank you guys. from all your input and your letters and your emails, because it's helpful, and I love where we're going. A little bit more specifically, because Dylan had asked, and Julie, and even Jen, I thought about getting rid of Two Brews Road, and then maybe that's not the best thing to do, and then we thought about getting rid of Midland Spur, and maybe that's not the best thing to do. One, weighing them around is something that I'm sort of playing with. I'm wondering if you guys have discussed that as a way to not have a major road going through the two ends of the park, but still allowing traffic to function. So I'd like to hear a discussion or result of discussion at some point about if that's a good idea or a bad idea. That's all I got for now. I'm just excited I wanted to talk.
You're so excited, you're shaky. Yeah, Bernie.
I'm not going to comment right now, but I asked Mike to explain to the public what is the financial plan that we unanimously, Gary wasn't there, but on Friday, we unanimously requested that Others Associates perform an economic analysis for us, and I'd like him to explain why we did that and what that's going to look like, what information we're going to get. We all felt like we needed this financial analysis to be on sounder ground to make our discussions more meaningful.
Can we let Mike answer that after we kind of stay on this creative
Okay.
master plan?
Fine.
Yes.
I want to thank P&Z and DHC and everybody that's been involved in this. P&Z is always the redheaded stepchild, in my opinion. No one ever gives them any credit for anything. You guys have done a lot of work. I agreed with Julie on the year-round activities at the park. I think that's a very important component, whether it be a skating rink or some kind of a thermal pool like shown on the diagram, something to keep the vitality there, not just 6 months. The reason I'm so balanced as far as development in a park is, you know, we're on the hook for a pretty good sum, and most of the renditions here calling for this building to be, you know, torn down and a new town hall built. So it's not that we get paid back, but we need to have a little balance there, and that's important. And I think a lot of people forget about that we're going to have to build a new town hall, and in today's dollars, that's going to be pretty expensive. I agreed with Ted on the zoning and the comments the citizens made. I think that is a good way for a developer to at least look at a good starting point on height, mass, and scale. I noticed that there was some proposals in here for 47 rooms on the hotel. I think that's a better number, maybe even just slightly lower than that. I know there's a balance there of how many rooms you need to kind of make it work. A small fishing lodge has always been my vision, and I think that would suffice. I was in favor of the realignment of Midland Spur. I think that's option 5. Like the gentleman said, you push those buildings against the hill and it's not going to block any views. I thought maybe a roundabout there, but then again the farmer's market would be left out, so that alignment would work pretty well, I think. And like Rob said, in the last 18 months, this is the best meeting I've seen. You're not all glaring at each other and not clapping for one side or the other. And I think it's great. We're finally coming together. I was about to throw my hands in the air because I was getting tired of hearing about it and just, you know, wanted something to happen. And finally, patience is a virtue. So here we are, and that's all I've got.
You got lots of patience.
Not very.
Herschel?
I like the way we're going. I think that the direction that Post and P&Z and the consultants are considering the options, and so I think that there will be a lot of information for whichever developer wants to come in. I think that in the creation of these plans, it's narrowing down. I agree entirely with Rob that in the packet, we had all these pictures, we had all of these options and possibilities, and it just gets you excited thinking about what a wonderful thing this can be and how important to the town for generations. I mean, I look at these photos of the terraces and landforms and the ability to use that wherever it would appropriately go for the bandstand idea, and I just see it happening, and the possibility of cross-country tracks up and down the trails in the winter. We can really make this a year-round thing. So I'm excited. I think you guys are doing a great job. I think you're taking us where we absolutely need to go, and I'm in favor of Resolution 34 in that it gives you guys some rain to whip those horses up and get us going. And it's time for us to accomplish a lot. And I don't want to see your hands up. That would be terrible.
Can I say one more
Sure,
thing?
of course.
If you guys would please remember, the caboose is kind of important to me. I mean, it's been there a long time, and if we could find a place to put it, I don't see it here on any of the drawings. That's all.
Yes.
And I'm also in favor of Resolution 34, and Ted, I think that we will get to a point where we discuss heights and sizes and scales and densities, but it's probably not going to be tonight with this resolution, but we're heading that way as we zero in what we're shooting for.
Yes, sir.
I think this packet is very dense. I read it twice, and I'm not sure I've got everything down, but I think it's a model of good planning, thought out carefully, looks at the big picture, which is, I think, what we're here for tonight, not the minutiae. One thing I saw that it said, it recommended keeping the look along with that look of the town, and I would like to suggest we add something to that, and that is that it should also consider the look of its immediate neighbors on the river, which is the library and the RMI building. One is hard modern, the other is soft modern. They are both landmarks. And I would hate to see just another typical Western storefront. That's cliche. Every other town in Colorado probably has one of those. And I know Cottle's building, for instance, is very modern and interesting. And I think it adds to the eclecticism of an interest of the town.
Is that a word? Okay,
So I heard a good suggestion, I think, by Dylan, and that is when we're looking at size, mass, and scale, we give some leeway for exceptionality. So the initial presentation at 150,000 square feet, I thought was very unexceptional, even though it was quite nice, the facade and all. And I would say that looking at density, the P&Z meeting was very well attended, probably more well attended than this. Few people didn't want anything, a few people wanted what was shown. The majority of people, and I would agree with them, suggested in some way breaking up the mass and allowing more pedestrian access through those buildings. And that's my feeling as well. I will disagree with the mayor and Jerry in that I think it is imperative the developer come out with a profit, or he's not going to be investing tens of millions of dollars in remaking our town. To that effect, we are having, and Mike will explain it, this economic analysis done for us, and we all felt it was very worthwhile waiting the 2 months to have a factual basis to make our decisions.
Okay, well, I heard so many things here tonight that I really liked, and I also was excited. Maybe not quite as excited as Rob. I think he had coffee on the way in. But I really would have to say Dylan's remarks were probably what hooked me the most, because I had an English teacher who said, show, don't tell, and you drew me very much of a picture of what matches what I've always thought, which is the ability to have big events, the ability to have small events, the ability to do something year-round. And to me, that's what this is about, and it lines up with what Kathy said, which is focus on the public amenities. Create all of the buildings around the public amenities, because I think that is really going to be where we make ourselves different than anyone else who's just building buildings. I mean, we could build like a mini Willits here, but I don't think that's really what we want. We have this opportunity that no place else has. I'll say it again, we've got this downtown on a river that we can actually have fun all year round. So I would say that as well. I agree also with the concept of zoning it rather than letting PUD drive it. I have said this since I was a baby counselor some, I don't know, 16 or 18 years ago. It makes a lot of sense. You get to decide then, and you don't have to then work backwards from what someone brings you. So I agree with both Kathy and Ted on that. I agree with Glenn very much that if there's a way to bring in historical perspective, let's not lose that. I mean, it's very easy to lose it. It's much easier to build over it and build on top of it than it is to bring it back. So I totally agree with that. I hope that you will, you did mention you didn't have really time. I call it Sandy's recommendation because I can't remember what letters have been assigned to it, but the concept of opening up more of Lions Park and pushing stuff into that hillside that is not going to be in anybody's face and is not going to be problematic, because I've heard many people say we want more of this open, and for me there's a lot of reasons to do that. Maybe not all of it, but I think that is the natural connection to the other side of the street, which brings me to my other thought, which is I wouldn't give up totally on closing that street or slowing it down to the point where it can't be used by vehicles, because I see that as being an extension, these two parks being a connection, a place to expand the fun when you want to, kind of thing. Let's see. And I guess the last thing I would say is that I would really like to see you create the best design, the best future for downtown for all ages, but I specifically am thinking more like younger people with families, because I'll probably be shot, but we have a downtown full of people my age, and we don't want that necessarily narrow of a perspective. So I would love for it to be more noisy, you know, and I agree with what a lot of people said, that if you go to a hotel and it's super noisy, you will move the next night to Willits. I guarantee you, I've done it. So I think we need to be careful about sleeping and yelling really loud together. And I think Kathy also mentioned that as something to really look at. And I would also say that I would hope that the master planning process is not one that is, not that I don't agree that there has to be if the developer's involved, they have to make a profit, but that should not be the focus of a master plan. It should be not open-ended craziness maybe, but mostly of like, what is the very best thing? Let us and the next people worry about how it gets paid for, whether we have to buy part of it or whether we have to give pieces of land to a developer. Please don't let that enter in. If you think there should be open space there, or if you think a building should be there, do that. Don't be thinking, how can we make this work? How can we predetermine a profit? I wish you wouldn't do that. And I hear that said amongst all of us here, because it's a natural component of the conversation. But I think let us worry about that part of it.
Can I have one more slide? Does everybody else got one? My main concern, and I think Susan answered my question, was that when we had our 5-2 vote, which was a supermajority in favor of splitting in half the CDC parcel, half for park for public use and half for development, I think that was a very good compromise that I would always stand by, and I think that tried to meet the needs for development and tried to meet the needs of many people in this town who want to maximize the park on the riverfront. And part of that is required because the public park that the town bought is in the floodplain. It's only a part-time park, and as Mike has explained to me, we have to build that according to Bureau of Reclamation or the Corps of Engineers to restore the riverbank. That is not going to be a warm and fuzzy grassy area. That is going to have native grasses, trees, and shrubs, and that's mandated by our river restoration park. As we have seen with our own eyes, with flooding, that park will not be available for use every year. And so I think it's imperative we keep what we agreed to. Now, Susan explained to me that if you see the black line, remember we went directly from Midland Spur, and that we went